Hello, everyone, and welcome to the sixth and final session in American English Live Teacher Development Series 8. My name is Lauren, and I'll be with you today, along with my colleagues behind the scenes, Amy and Amanda, who will be serving as moderators to help answer your questions and respond to your comments during the session. Today, our host Kate will be talking with our presenter, John Kotnarowski, about strategies for structuring pair and group work to maximize student-to-student engagement. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're so happy, as always, to see you here with us today for another great webinar. Sadly, our last of this series, but we're really excited to learn and share with you today. So let's begin with these great comments from participants from our last webinar. So our first one is from Lorena. Using the strategies shared here, every learner has the opportunity to speak and share their ideas. Very nice. Thanks for that comment, Lorena. And from Rebecca, great session, great learning experience, and worth sharing with colleagues. Thanks so much. Thank you, Rebecca. And from Rova, Tiana, wonderful tips and ideas for activities, very adaptable. Awesome. So we love to see our teacher participants actively engaged in professional development, and we encourage you to continue to engage with our community virtually. We love that you are sharing your ideas and comments here with us. So please continue to do so and share your thoughts and insights about AE Live sessions by emailing them to americanenglishwebinars@fhi360.org or by sharing them on social media. If you share on social media, tag us at American English for Educators. We may feature one of your photos during the next webinar. And before we continue, I also want to take a moment today to say that today is sadly our last day with moderator Amy here. We've loved working with her, and we know that she's helped you a lot with facilitating these webinars in a way that makes them fun, engaging, and applicable to your teaching context. Feel free to take a moment in the chat box or comments today to tell her goodbye. But if you are an Access teacher through the English Access Micro Scholarship Program, you can still stay in touch with her on one of her Facebook pages that we're listing here. Thanks, Amy, for all your work with us. We'll miss you and are so thankful for the amazing job you've done and our time working on webinars with you. So thanks, Amy. All right, today is our sixth and final session in American English Live Teacher Development Series 8. We've explored sessions related to the themes of teaching reading in the EFL classroom, communicative language teaching, fun and varied approaches for common grammar topics, and pair and group work to encourage student-to-student interaction. We hope you're able to use the practical ideas we share. Have you had a favorite session? Let us know in the chat box. And so here's a little bit about what to expect today. Each session is about 60 minutes long and is often related to an online professional English network, or OPEN, massive open online course. The presenter will present the material, and I, as your host, will ask questions and make comments as well. But we really hope to hear from you, our audience, so that we can address your ideas and experiences. Please do share your thoughts and comments feature or the chat box today. When our session comes to a close in about an hour, you'll have an opportunity to receive a digital badge for your participation. At the end of the session, we'll share a link in the comments and at the top of this post. Click on that link and complete a short quiz about today's session. You must answer 2 out of 3 multiple choice questions correctly. And once you've successfully done so, you can expect to receive your badge via email from badger@badger.io in about a week. So American English Live Teacher Development Series 9 begins on September 23rd and will take place every other Wednesday through December 2nd at 8 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time from Washington, D.C. So we hope to see you all there. During Series 9, we'll explore the topics of collaborative learning in the English language classroom, cultivating meaningful discussion using critical thinking skills, and corrective feedback in the English language classroom. We hope you'll join us for this exciting professional development opportunity. Registration is not required, but if you'd like to receive reminder emails, visit the link both on the screen and in the comments. And now for today's session, Classmates as Language Learning Allies, activities to encourage student-to-student interaction. To learn a language, you must use the language, and practicing with friends and classmates is a great way to do this. In this webinar, we'll discuss how to structure pair and group work activities to increase student participation in language learning activities, Explore fun icebreaker activities, the think-pair-shair principle, and different strategies for grouping students. And demonstrate how pair and group activities can be an enjoyable and interactive way for students to see classmates as people who can help them improve their English skills. And now we're pleased to introduce our presenter, John Kotnarowski. John has spent the last 10 years teaching English to speakers of other languages. He's taught in Ecuador, China, and the United States, and was a U.S. Department of State English Language Fellow in Moscow, Russia during the 2014 to 15 academic year. He currently works at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign as a lecturer in the linguistics department. His teaching interests include all levels of academic writing, as well as materials design and development. Outside of teaching, he loves reading, playing games, watching movies, and hiking with his wife and their dog. Welcome, John. We're so happy to have you here with us today.
Thanks for that introduction, Kate. It's nice to be here. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us today. I'm John, and I'm really excited to be leading our session today, Classmates as Language Learning Allies. And since this is a session on promoting interaction in the classroom, I'm really hoping that you guys will be willing to share your comments and questions, and we can have a good discussion about activities that get students speaking and sharing with one another. So I wanted to begin with a question, and I want to know, how are you guys doing today? If you can share the answer in the chat box, I'd really appreciate it.
All right, let us know, everybody, how do you feel today? It's our last webinar of this series, which is wonderful, but a little bit sad. We have a lot going on all over the world. Maybe you're teaching online, or maybe you're teaching in person. Looks like people are saying that they're doing great, perfectly good, busy as usual from Hero A.
Yeah, these sound like, that sounds like how I'm doing. I'm doing great, but I feel pretty busy. It's nice to see everybody is so positive in the chat box. Feeling accomplished, I see. That's awesome. So I can tell that just from your answer to that short little question that we're going to have a really great and participatory session today. So thanks, guys. So one of the reasons that I am so excited to talk about promoting interaction in the classroom is because as an English teacher, one of my favorite sounds in the world is a busy classroom with people talking and laughing and discussing and gesturing and even arguing. And so not only do I really like listening to students and watching them discuss, but I really like it when students are able to share their ideas with one another and build relationships with one another. I think when the classroom becomes a place for people to interact freely and support each other and respect each other, learning becomes more enjoyable for everyone involved. But I also know that it can be difficult to get students to talk openly and freely. So I've actually spent a lot of time thinking about the best ways to structure pair and group work activities to get students talking. And that's what I hope to talk about with everybody today. So here's a little overview of our session today. We're going to first talk about the idea of interaction and why it's important in the English classroom. From there, I want to introduce a few fun icebreaker activities that get students talking from the beginning of class and get them excited to interact with one another. After that, I'd like to talk a little bit about the think-pair-shair principle and how we can use it to structure pair and group activity. And then we'll talk a little bit about a few activities that can build off think-pair-shair. And then finally, at the end, I want to talk about a few different grouping strategies. So let's get started with a warm-up question. I'm curious, and I would love to hear from everyone, what does the term interaction mean? And can you give me an example? Share your answers in the chat box, please.
Yeah, what do you think, everybody? How would you define the term interaction, especially when it comes to your language classrooms? And can you give an example of that? Maybe what it looks like in your classroom. Let's see, Natalia says, interaction equals collaboration and communication. Nice.
Yeah.
Questionnaires, nice, okay. Exchange of ideas from Sunbeam. From Gowrie, when two or more people are talking and sharing ideas, very nice. What else? Collaboration and sharing of thoughts and ideas. And Anisja says, when students engage in an activity, that's interaction. Socializing with others from Adhe. And sharing ideas and working things together from Donna. Lots of great ideas, everybody. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, these are great definitions, and they're very close to the definition or idea of interaction that I'd like to talk about today. So there are lots of different interaction or definitions of interaction, as we've seen from everybody's great comments. But the one that I like to refer to is one from the linguist Stephen Krashen. And Krashen's idea of interaction is when students are communicating naturally and focused on sharing messages and information, and not so much on grammar and proper form. So sometimes our classes are focused on teaching new vocabulary and grammar. And in these classes, our goal is to introduce a new concept or rule or set of words to get students to practice with them, and then ask students to demonstrate their understanding through an activity or a quiz. But as we all know, using language is a lot more than memorizing grammar and vocabulary. It's a tool to accomplish actions and express ourselves and share ideas. So I have another question for you guys. Why is interaction in the English language classroom so important? Share your ideas in the chat box, please.
All right, we heard that great definition that John shared from Stephen Krashen. And now we want to focus on the classroom even more. Why is it important for your language classroom? So Irma says to practice language in real life. Great. Let's see, what else? What do you think? Why is interaction important? Sunbeam says to establish a connection. Rano, to rise understanding. I love that.
Yeah.
To make learning real from Jessica. To acquire language naturally from Asude, which I think definitely we would agree with. A meaningful reason to use the language from Nick. Great response. And students can learn from one another, which I think, which is from Nicoleta. And I think John probably very much agrees with you on that one.
Absolutely.
All right, great responses, everybody. Thanks so much.
Yeah, these are awesome answers. I saw another one, learning by doing is the golden rule. And I really like that, especially in terms of interaction and its importance in the classroom. So I kind of wanted to review why I feel interaction is so important in the classroom. On the next slide, I have a few of my reasons. And just like you guys mentioned, if you want to learn a language, you have to use it. So the example that I always like to give is it's hard or maybe impossible to play a musical instrument well if you don't practice it, if you don't play it. So similarly, it's difficult to learn a language without using it like native speakers do, or without using it like it's used in real life. I think second, as many people have mentioned, when we focus on practicing natural or real life language without worrying about rules, it's more real life. We're challenging students to use the language like they would outside the classroom. Additionally, I think it's important to give students opportunities to make mistakes. And I think interaction gives students the chance to make mistakes, have fun making mistakes, see making mistakes as natural and not really a big deal, and also give students a chance to practice recovering if they make a mistake. Number 4, I think interaction is so important because sometimes the only place that students have to practice the language is in the classroom. And so we want to make sure that we're giving opportunities for real life practice in addition to the form focus on grammar and vocabulary. And then finally, if there are many opportunities for interaction and fun, then I think students can hopefully start to see their classmates as language learning partners, as allies, like the title of the presentation says. And ideally, and this is my dream as a teacher, if students start making relationships in the classroom, then maybe they'll practice English outside the classroom too. So interaction is important for a lot of different reasons. And now let's take a look at a few ways that we can promote fun, natural communication in class. So my first tip for promoting interaction in our English classroom is to create a sense of community in our classroom. To promote a good environment for interaction, I think it's important for students to have the chance to get to know one another and to build relationships and a sense of community in the classroom. So I think it's easier to get students to participate if you let them know from the beginning of class that it will be an expectation and that everyone has something valuable to contribute. To help students see this, at the beginning of a new class, I really like to let students know a little bit about me as a person. So here you can see this is part of a little presentation that I like to give at the start of each new class that shares some of my interests, likes, who I am as a person. I really enjoy sharing about my interests and hobbies, like the pictures of street art that I have on this slide. I want students to know more about me more than just a teacher. I want students to know what I'm interested in so that they can ask me questions. Maybe we'll have something in common that we can talk about before or after class. And I also want to be an example for them to follow, because after I introduce myself, I would like to have students introduce themselves. So to do this, I usually will start with a few basic questions. I'll put these on the board, and I'll ask things like, where are you from? What do you like to do in your free time? What's your favorite food? What's your favorite English word? And I'll put them on the board, um, and I'll ask students to think about answers and to tell them to get ready to share with the rest of the class. So I have another question for you guys. I'm curious, what do you think are some other good questions that you can ask to get to know someone?
Yeah, what other questions would you ask to get to know someone, everybody? What do you think? Let's see. What are some good get to know you questions? Maybe you've used in your classroom or in other parts of your life. Oh, yeah, great. Asking about hobbies, likes, dislikes, and preferences. Great. What else? Another hobbies from Karima. You could choose 3 words that best describe you. I like that one from Nicoletta.
That's cool.
Your favorite place to visit. What are your interests from Shazia? And I will say, just a little plug, is that americanenglish.state.gov has some great games that help with these kinds of questions, like name your favorite this, or tell, one of the games is called About Me. So anyways, but yeah, what are your expectations for the class from Guadalupe? Just asking students how they feel from Katya. Great. Thanks,
Yeah,
everyone.
these are great questions. I saw a really awesome one. What superpower do you want to have? I think that's a
Nice.
great question. So I think these are all excellent questions. And usually what I'll do is after I write the questions on the board, so here we've got, what's your favorite food? Where's your favorite place to visit? Do you have a favorite movie or TV show? Um, I like to then give students some time to think and compose their answers. So for me, sometimes in my experience, students don't really want to share with the group because they haven't had time to think about what they want to say and how they want to say it. So I think it's helpful to give some time for students to think before they share so that they can develop answers that they feel proud to share with everybody else. So after I give students a chance to think about their answers to these introductory questions, I'll then ask everybody to stand up and share so that they know from the very first class that sharing and participating is something that I expect. As they share, I make notes and ask follow-up questions, just as a demonstration that yes, we're going to work together as teacher and student, and we're going to work together as a class, but we're also working together as people with interests and likes and dislikes. And I find that it's really helpful if I remember, oh, John really likes basketball, or Maria really likes cooking. And then before and after class, if we have a little bit of time, we can have short conversations that help create this sense of community in class. So finally, after everybody's introduced themselves, I like to share my philosophy on the importance of community in a language learning class. So I like this quote. It says, "Those who want to go fast, go alone. those who want to go far go together. And I really like this quote. And after I share it, I'll explain to students that the time we spend getting to know each other helps us build this group. And when we work together as a group, we can go a little bit further than if we were going together on our own. So that's my first tip. Now, my second tip for promoting interaction in class is I think using icebreaker activities is a really great way to encourage fun interaction. And I have another question before we continue. Can anybody tell me, what is an icebreaker? And can you give me an example of a possible icebreaker?
Yeah, what do you think, everybody? How would you define an icebreaker, and what are some examples that you maybe have used in your classroom or elsewhere? Rano says warming up. Great.
Yep.
Let's see. Icebreakers help for students to get to know each other better, from Victoria. Very nice.
Absolutely.
JP says he likes that quote that you shared.
Cool.
Let's see. Icebreaker activities are activities that let students know themselves and others better. Very nice. Games, energizers from Sarika. Motivating activities from Ryan. Student levels, let's see, an activity that triggers learning. Very nice. A game to break the silence. Example, the boat is sinking game. Interesting, Doris. We'd love to hear more about that. Cool. All right, great responses.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all those ideas and definitions, everyone. So I really like using icebreakers. I use them a lot. And for me, an icebreaker is just a short, fun activity designed to get students in the mood to talk and interact more. So they help break through student hesitation to speak. So that's the ice that we're trying to break. And I find that when I use icebreakers at the start of a class, it's usually much easier to get students to continue speaking throughout the rest of class. So I have a couple of activities, icebreaker activities, that I really like. And I think these are great at the beginning of a new semester. If you put students into new groups and you want them to get to know their new group members, and even on a Monday when everybody seems a little bit tired. So my first icebreaker activity idea is called Find Someone Who. So maybe you guys have played this or have heard of this before, but to play Find Someone Who, each student is going to get a question sheet. And then the instructor will give them some time to read the questions on the sheet. And then by going around the room and asking questions, each student tries to find as many classmates as possible who can answer the questions. For me, I usually play the person who can find the most people in 5 minutes will win the game, but you can change that. It could be 2 minutes, it could be 10 minutes. And I really think it's a great fun way to get people talking at the beginning of class. So on the next slide, we can see an example of a question sheet that I might give to students, and it's their job to turn the categories into questions. So one easy way to adapt the game is, instead of using handouts or sheets of paper, the teacher can write out the categories on the board at the front of the classroom, and then students can create their own grids on a piece of paper. So if everybody can see the board clearly, it's not necessary for students to write down all of the categories. Instead, they can simply ask the questions and write the names of their classmates who answer the question. So we can see we've got an example in the top corner. It says loves running. So for this category, the question would be, do you like running, or do you love running? And if we go to the next slide, we can see what this interaction might look like. So here we've got a busy classroom, everybody's up and interacting and participating. And our first student might ask, do you like running? The second student will respond, yes, I love to run. The first student will say, cool, what's your name again? And the second student will give her name. It's Xiao. And then the first student on her sheet is going to write down Xiao's name. So it's kind of like a mini scavenger hunt that helps students learn a little bit more about one another. And whenever I play this game, it's usually short and sweet. That's why I say I like 5 minutes. But during those 5 minutes, it's a flurry of activity, people going around, asking questions, laughing. And even if you ask a question and you say, hey, do you like running? And they say no, you just laugh and you go to the next person. So it's a great way to get people up, moving around, and talking.
Yeah, this is such a great activity. We have a lot of nice comments in the chat about this. People who are saying that they love to play this game with their students. Karima says teachers can play with their students so that we can know each other better, which is nice. We did have one question previously about implementing these types of activities in our current situation. So I think the person was asking about virtual options for this. Do you have any ideas for a virtual option for something like Find Someone Who?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question, especially considering a lot of us are teaching online now. So one thing that I will say is with any online activity, for me, it's really important to give very clear directions. And oftentimes, I think it's important to give a little bit more time than you would for a face-to-face version of an activity. And so for this particular activity, I have 2 ideas. First, if you have the ability to put students into groups, so for example, I know you can do that on Zoom. What you could do is you could put students into groups and maybe groups of 3 or 4. They can ask each other questions in that group for a few minutes, and then you'll pull them back to class and put them into new groups. All right, so that's one way we could adapt this depending on the platform. Another way is including a little bit of writing into this. So let's say you're doing a class on sports and the teacher before class asks students to write a little bit about their favorite sports, their favorite activities, why they think sports are fun or important. And each student will come up with a short little paragraph about sports for themselves. Then I think the instructor can go through, read these, and come up with the Find Someone Who questions based on what the students have written. And then students can go through, read the bios or read the little information that their classmates have written, and they can fill out the chart on their own. The teacher could give a time limit, or the teacher could say, I want you to try and fill up the whole board. There's an answer to each of these questions among the classmates' information. And with this, you're integrating also a little bit of reading and writing practice as well. It's not as much speaking focused, but you're still getting a little bit of interaction that way. So I think those are 2 ways that we could adapt this for a more online approach.
Wonderful. Yeah, and we had just a really quick response to that from Alex, who says, yeah, you could have the students also prepare slips of paper and marker and write short answers and hold it up in the
Awesome.
video chat, which I think we might be doing a little bit of in a minute here.
Yep.
So yeah, great idea. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, these are awesome. Thank you. And again, if you guys have ideas on how to adapt, or if you've played these games before or done these activities, please share your ideas in the chat. I think we can all learn from each other, and that makes the discussion a little bit more exciting for me too. So on the next slide, I've got another icebreaker activity. And so this is something, I think it goes by different names, but I like to call it guiding the artist. So for this activity, the teacher needs to select a picture, but the teacher should not show that picture to the class. All right, it's a secret. Then I like to put students into groups of 3 or 4. One person in each group is going to be the artist. And I think this should be a volunteer. So oftentimes there's somebody who likes to doodle or draw, or who just says, I'll be brave and I'll volunteer. So one person will be the artist and everyone else in the group will be the guide. Okay. So once each group has an artist, that person must turn around so that they cannot see the teacher. All right. Then the teacher will show the picture to the rest of the class so that the guides can see it. The guides will take a little bit of time and look at the picture, and they need to then describe it to the artist so that he or she can draw it. All right. They can use gestures. They can use any kind of vocabulary or grammar. All right. But the idea is to describe the picture well enough for the artist to draw it. Okay. So I actually thought it might be kind of fun to do a practice round all together. Kate, would you be willing to be our artist?
I guess so. Everybody's going to realize my art skills, but yes, I will do it.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for being brave. Do you have something to draw with and a piece of paper?
Yes, I do.
Excellent. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to please turn around so that I can show everyone else the picture. All right, please turn around. Okay. And now I'm going to show everybody the picture so we can all see. Kate's not looking. All right. Okay, so here's our picture. And what I'd like you guys to do is use the chat box to describe it. And I will give Kate, our artist, your clues. All right. And we can see what kind of picture she comes up with. Now, one note, I want you to try and be as specific as possible. And remember, she just has one pen. Okay. So here's the picture. In the chat box, please type short descriptions to help Kate's drawing. All right. So I have the first clue, Kate. It says 4 people are running. And the second clue says players keep kicking the ball. All right. Another clue is it's a football match and there are 4 girls playing. All right. So they are chasing after a ball. All right, I've got another clue. It says one of the players is using both feet. All right. Another clue says it's usually played in an open field. So here's where, yep. So we've got girls are playing soccer. 2 players are chasing the ball. Ooh, this is a good one. It's no gender discrimination for true potential and talent. That's a great point. How's it going, Kate?
I think it's okay. I think so.
All right. Any other? What's happening maybe in the back of the picture? Oh, nice. Okay. So the girls that are chasing the ball, one of them they both have long tied hair. One is in front and one is waiting in the back. They're very close to each other. All right. Let's see. Can we get any more descriptions from everyone? Maybe one more. All right. Ooh, okay. So here's the last one. It says behind both players with the ball, there's a goal post. Okay, so behind both players, there's a soccer goal. All right. Okay, so I'm curious to see what you were able to come up with. Kate, would you mind showing us your picture? Holy, jump up and down.
Hold on a second. Let me, 1 sec.
Holy cow. That is, I mean, that's like Picasso-esque, given all of the clues that we were giving you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think in the chat we should all congratulate Kate on that awesome drawing. That looks great.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I don't know if you want to just show only my screen for a minute, just to make sure everybody can see this really incredible drawing that just so everybody can see, because sometimes we can only see the speaker. So just really quickly, maybe just show my screen only for a minute and then go back to sharing the slides. Thanks everybody for your very clear guidance on that.
Yeah, no, it's a great drawing. You did an awesome job, Kate. Thanks everybody for the great descriptions. Um, so there's a lot going on in our picture, okay? And if we were to do this with a class of students, maybe everyone in a group wouldn't know all the exact words, but that's okay. Because actually, I think a big part of a game like this is to just have fun and make some mistakes. And I think Kate was able to get the main idea, right, of the picture. And that's kind of like communication. As long as we can get our main idea across, we're doing some good interaction. All right. So on the next slide, I have an example picture that I created. And I would say that Kate's it beats mine hands down. So congratulations again to you, Kate.
Thank you. I think
Um,
it's great too.
Thank you very much. So, you know, in the end, we usually don't get amazing artwork from this activity, and that's not the point. The point is to have some fun, to interact, to make some mistakes, and then at the end, everybody can show their drawings to the class, and there's usually a good laugh or two. All right. So this goes towards building community again, interaction to help build community. All right. So let's move on. We've talked about our icebreakers, and now I want to talk about how we can continue to encourage interaction with think, pair, share. All right. So before we talk about this strategy, I have another question for everyone. How do you like to group students? How do you like to put students into groups? Share your ideas in the chat, please.
Yeah, thanks everybody. What are some grouping strategies that you use? There are so many different ways that we can group our students for different activities. What are some of the ways that you group your students? And thanks everyone for the comments. Let's see. Counting off. Yes, that's a great one from Sunbeam. Let's see. Asking them to count 1, 2, 3, and all the ones go together, the twos go together, etc. Jasmine says according to their skills and ability. Asude says different paced students, so maybe some students go more quickly and they'd be in one group. Heterogeneous levels or a combination of boys and girls from Dawn, very nice. Andrew says mix them with the talkative one and the less talkative one. That's a nice idea, so they can build off of each other's strengths, and maybe the shyer students can be encouraged to chat more. Mixed abilities from Safina's. Or maybe based on their interests, like everybody who likes running go in this group, everybody who likes this go in another group. Very nice. Great ideas, everybody. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, these are awesome. And we're going to talk a little bit more about grouping strategies at the end of the presentation today. For me, to get students to continue talking through class, I think it's helpful to break down interaction into more manageable parts to give students time to first think on their own, then share with a small audience, and then hopefully share with a bigger group or the whole class. And so one way to do this is by following a strategy called think-pair-shair. So this all begins with the instructor presenting the idea or topic that will be discussed in class, followed by an open-ended question. So we've been talking about sports today. So one open-ended question I might ask is, what do you think are the qualities of a good athlete? Try and list 3. And then after I ask this question, I might put a couple of key phrases up on the board just to remind students of some of the grammar and vocabulary that we've been talking about. So to answer this question, one thing that I might put up on the board is, I think a good athlete should be, or I think a good athlete must. But I don't like to spend a lot of time talking about these phrases. Ideally, we've already introduced them in another class. I just like to put them on the board to remind students that they can use them if they want. Then it's time to think. And like I mentioned before with the introductory questions, for me, it's really important to give students a chance to think and answer the questions themselves. So they can take notes or they can just think to themselves for a little bit. But this period of time helps students come up with an answer without feeling pressured. All right. I try and lower the stress level, lower the anxiety. And then if people have the time to come up with something that they're proud of, something that they really like, or just something at all, maybe they'll be more inclined to share later on in class. So the next part is pair. All right. And as you might guess from the name of this step, during the pair phase, they get together with a partner and they can compare answers. So this is nice because they're not just thinking on their own, they're doing a little bit of interaction, but it's not with a big group, it's not with the whole class, it's just with one other person. All right. So in addition to asking students to share their answers to the question that I asked earlier, I might ask another question when they're with their pairs just for groups that finish a little quickly. So in this case, I might ask students, do you have any qualities in common? Or why do you feel these qualities of a good athlete are important? So when students are in their pairs, I like to monitor and scribe. So to make sure each pair is moving forward and working on the task, I like to quietly listen in to the conversations that they're having. This is monitoring. So while listening, I might also take some notes, and that's known as scribing. So I have another question for you guys. What should the teacher listen for during pair discussions? Share your answers in the chat.
Yeah, as you are monitoring and walking around the room, trying to think about what the students are doing, what should you be listening for? What maybe would you be taking notes on or making note of in your mind? What do you think, everybody? What are some things that you could listen for during pair discussions? Gowrie says whether the discussion is going in the right direction or not. Very nice. And I think a lot of us as teachers, we know, is it, first of all, is it in the target language, in this case, English? And then, of course, is it on the topic we're asking them to speak about?
Yep.
Very good. So yeah, and target language also, Ibrahim had that idea. Great. Let's see, Irma says you could check for grammar errors, and you could also kind of tell what students are participating or not. Very nice. Listening for their ideas and opinions from Don de Guzman. Very nice. Collecting information on how student discussion is going from Sachiko, and making sure that all students are engaged from Tagreed. And Sunil says pronunciation, grammar, vocabulary. Great, wonderful ideas, everybody. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, these are great ideas. And actually, I want to ask a follow-up question now. So why should teachers take notes? Why should teachers practice scribing as they're listening to the pair discussions that are happening in class? What do you guys think? Share your answers in the chat box, please.
Yeah, why should you take notes while you're monitoring these ideas, everybody? Let's see. What do you think? To give feedback, great, from Sunbeam. Maybe you can remember better if you take the notes and give feedback, very nice. In order to guide learners right away, nice. Let's see. To learn more about the students from Venice. Let's see. So you can give feedback at the end from Mu Hasir. And based on their answers and notes, you can also group students in different ways from Hey Trudes. Very nice. And one more, to learn more about the mistakes that students make so you can adjust your teaching. Great, wonderful ideas, everybody.
Yeah, I think we are all on the same page. These are great answers. So for me, honestly, I feel like monitoring and scribing are my secret teaching superpowers. So I like to take notes to help me remember when there are good answers in class so that maybe later on I can ask that person to share. I also like to take notes to find common questions. So if groups have asked me the same question, I'll write it down and make sure we can debrief about it after the activity is over. I also think that, as many of you guys mentioned, it can help to find and remember common trouble spots for us to review later on. And then last but not least, timing. So sometimes we think an activity is going to take 10 minutes and it only takes 5 minutes. Sometimes we think it will take 10 minutes, and in reality, we need 20 minutes. So by monitoring and listening, I have a better idea of the class's progress, and I can adjust my lesson plan accordingly. So I also saw someone mention this in the chat, and I was really happy to see it. But when I monitor, I try not to interrupt the conversation. So this can be a little bit strange for students at first, but I'll usually just tell them, don't mind me, I just want to hear what you guys are talking about. Maybe if somebody has a great answer, I'll say, oh, that's a cool idea. Or if I see a group that's not really talking, I might say, okay, can somebody tell me what you think about this question? Or I might ask, what do you guys think are some qualities of a good athlete? But I mainly just try and observe. And the reason I try not to interrupt is because I feel like when I interrupt, the attention goes from natural interaction to kind of unnatural, let's listen to the teacher for a little bit, and then we have to go back and feel comfortable again, and then the conversation has to start up once more. So I don't like to interrupt the flow. And if I can do an activity without doing so, that's great. I try and just be a fly on the wall, listening and observing. So now we're at the share portion of our class. And for sharing, what I like to do is first maybe take 2 pairs and bring them together into a group of 4, okay? Or sometimes I'll just take the pairs and I'll bring everybody together as a whole class and we'll discuss together. And so hopefully at this point, everyone will have something to say. And additionally, based on the notes that I've taken, I can call on people that I think might have something that the rest of the class would benefit from hearing. And also, and this happens from time to time, if I bring the class together and no one wants to share, I can call on people because I have my notes and I can say, all right, Jose, I know you have a good answer to this question. Can you share it with the rest of us, please? And sometimes maybe I'll call on the first person and then other people will jump in. All right. So finally, to get students to really explain their answers, I love asking the question, why? Or can you give me an example? And I do this because it helps elicit longer answers. So instead of just 1 or 2 word answers, when you ask why, students need to justify. And that's a little bit more like real life conversation, more like the language that I hope to hear. All right, so I have another tip. And my next tip are, once we've done think, pair, share, it's really important to continue building off the foundation that we have created. So think, pair, share gets people feeling comfortable, gets people talking, and now we want to keep the interaction going. So I have a couple of ways to do this, and they're activities that I'm sure many of you are already familiar with. So once we've built our strong foundation, it's important to try and keep building and to keep the interaction going. So 2 fun ways to do this are information gap activities and role-playing activities. So let's take a look at how these can be used to keep the discussion going.
Yes, let's do that. And also we have a really quick question. Sorry about that, from Yusra. What does a fly on the wall mean?
Fly on the wall. Yeah, that's it's an expression that I like to use. So if we can just imagine what it would look like, a little fly on the wall. It's not talking, it's not buzzing around, it's just sitting there quietly. And I like to use it in the case of monitoring and scribing because hopefully no one even notices it. It's just a little fly on the wall, just quietly listening and observing to what's happening without bothering anyone.
All right, thanks so much. Yes, and let's get to these great activities.
Cool. So an information gap activity is just a type of activity where 2 or more students have part of the information, and to complete the task, they need to share with each other so that they have all of the information. So we've got a simple activity example on the next slide. So student A has some information, student B has some information, and each student has information that the other person needs. So they have to ask questions of each other in order to fill in the gaps, in order to fill in the missing information, right? So, however, we can make our info gaps a little bit more challenging if we add a little bit of role playing to them. And so role playing just means asking students to pretend that they're someone else. So let's take an example. Here, in this scenario, the instructor should divide the class into pairs and tell each pair, you and your partner are going to act as the team owner and coach for a basketball team. You're looking for a new player to add to your team. You must discuss the information on each player, decide who is right for your team, and be prepared to explain why. All right, so again, maybe students will ask, what does the word coach mean? What does the word owner mean? All right, owner, the businessman who pays or who bought the team. Coach is the person who helps with strategy. All right, but then students will get their information charts. All right, so here we can see the first student will get their coach chart. And they'll see on the top, they have information about 3 players. So in this case, our players are Jamal Jafari, Diego Delgado, and Bobby Buckets. All right. And they have information on each of these players. They have information about their experience, their performance, their personality, and then other factors, okay, maybe about their family. All right. So the first student will get the coach chart, and the second student will get the owner chart. And so we can see on the owner chart, there's missing information that only the coach can provide. All right. And once students have these charts, I like to give them, depends on the level, anywhere between 5 and 15 minutes to ask each other questions to fill in the gaps on their charts. So they should not just show each other their charts. All right, this is where monitoring becomes important. If I see 2 students just kind of scribbling down answers from each other's charts without talking, I'm going to interrupt. I will not be a fly on the wall there. I will say, hey guys, hide the information. I want to hear you talking. All right, so here we can see maybe an example question. So the first student says, can you tell me about Diego Delgado's personality? And the second student says, sure. He's polite and friendly, but he jokes too much. And as he's answering, the first student will just note the answer on her chart. All right. So after 5 minutes, both students should have all the information necessary to make the decision. And here we can see the completed chart. So now they have all the information. Now, once they have the information, the instructor is going to ask them to discuss who they want to pick. All right. Here, they can use the information on the chart, but they need to use their own grammar and vocabulary to create and explain their opinions. So here, it says, I worry that Bobby has a bad attitude and won't work well in the team. And then the other student says, I know, I agree, but he's really talented too. Okay. I think for a little bit of extra help, the instructor could also have students make a list of pros and cons for each player. So here we see an example of that. This is just a little bit of extra preparation, maybe for classes with slightly lower proficiency, okay? Or maybe you're practicing analyzing pros and cons and you want to do it for that. All right, so next, the teacher is going to ask each pair of students to make their final choice, all right? And they'll tell the students to be prepared to give reasons to justify their choices. So here we can see this pair thinks that Bobby Buckets would be the best choice. All right. And the process can actually continue from here. It doesn't have to end. So if we think about think, pair, share, we've just done the pair part, and now the process can continue in a bigger group of 4. So team A, they say, we want Jamal. Team B, they say, we want Bobby. And now instead of just 2 people discussing their pick, you've got 4 people discussing their pick. So we're slowly building up to that. All right. And I like to tell groups that they need to agree or they get no new player. All right. Finally, the instructor can bring the whole class back together and they can ask each group, who do they pick? And what I like to do is I like to try and see if there's a majority. All right, so in this case, we can see Jamal is the winner. 4 groups out of the total 8 have picked Jamal, and so that's the person who's going to be joining the team. So let's just take a real quick moment to analyze why this kind of activity works to promote interaction. So the situation or the activity begins by clearly describing the situation and asking students if they have any questions. Then both partners have information that the other person needs. This makes interaction necessary. All right. Once all of the information is collected, students can use that information to help with the discussion. All right. They don't have to make up all of their opinions themselves. All right. Then the partners are going to have a chance to share by themselves in a small pair. Then they share with another group. And then finally, the groups come together and the whole class can discuss. So by the time we get to the whole class discussion, even if someone doesn't want to share with the whole class, they've already had a chance to share maybe with their pair or in their small group. All right. So there's just enough structure to kind of guide students, but not enough that they're doing exactly what the teacher tells them to do. They still have a chance to think critically and be creative as well, and hopefully have a little bit of fun. So I wanted to finish with one final tip.
Great, and I want to quickly share some really nice comments right before you do that. So Sachiko says, that sounds interesting because an information gap activity combined with role play is new to me.
Cool.
And Trisha says, I think this activity would help students to develop critical thinking. And one more from Romualdo Mabuan, who's actually one of our STAR Online Professional English Network Program alumni, is here today, and he says, this is a great activity to develop more communication, collaboration, and critical thinking skills. And I think he'll be at Virtual TESOL tomorrow. Just wanted to say hello to him. So thanks for those great comments, everybody.
Yeah, thanks so much for these comments, everyone. Like I said at the beginning, these are activities that I use frequently. And all the points that you guys have made, it's kind of new for students, and it really does stimulate critical thinking. So I'm glad to see that you guys agree. So my final tip is just using a variety of grouping strategies. And this is something that everybody mentioned already earlier on in the presentation. So I think it's important to use a variety of strategies so that people can get to know as many of their classmates as possible. So first, usually, I will let students pick their partners. So if a student has a friend in class, I want you guys to work together. You already know each other. But then after a few weeks of class, I like to put students into new groups or new pairs. Sometimes I will group them by similar language ability. Sometimes I'll group them by different language level. Sometimes I group them randomly. So if you go online, you use your favorite search engine and you search for group randomizer, you can put in a list of your students, click randomize, and it will give you random groups. So that way, if students don't like their groups, you can just tell them, I didn't make it, the computer made it. And then, like you guys have mentioned already earlier, I think it can also be fun to group people in by themes. So maybe birthday month, height, favorite sport, favorite movie, favorite color. And I don't think it's necessary to change groups every class, but I do think changing every so often is really helpful because, like I mentioned, students get to know more of their classmates. And hopefully the more they know about their classmates, the more we can build that sense of community. So let's quickly conclude today's presentation. To promote interaction through pair and group work, I think it's first important to create a sense of community in the classroom because we can go farther together. I think using icebreakers is a great way to get people talking, and then hopefully once you have that spark, you can continue it throughout class. I think using think-pair-shair is a great way to break up interaction into more meaningful parts. And I try and build off think-pair-shair with infogaps and role plays to get students to think critically, use their imagination, but also give them a little bit of language support if they need it. And then finally, I think it's important to use a variety of grouping strategies so that students can get to know as many of their classmates as possible. So my final takeaway message is, if we as teachers can show students the value of pair and group work, hopefully they can start seeing their classmates as allies and supporters in their language learning journeys. And when that happens, English class becomes more enjoyable and productive for everyone involved. So thank you guys very much for having me today. I hope you have a great day and happy teaching.
Thank you so much, John, for sharing your expertise surrounding how to encourage student-to-student interaction during engaging pair or group work activities. I think we all have a better understanding of how to implement and or adapt these activities for our own classrooms. So thank you so much.
Awesome, great.
And of course, we'd like to thank you, our audience, for your lively engagement and participation today. We hope you'll continue to share your ideas through social media, on our Ning, or with your viewing groups after the session ends.